Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Studio Fusion. Glad to have you here. And welcome, Martin.
Thanks, Deborah.
I'm sorry, you were mid-sentence and I accidentally hit the button. I was
That's
getting
okay.
ready and I actually hit the button, but glad
Yeah,
to have everyone here. And
yeah,
this time we are talking about how to find topics for your podcast. So I thought
yes,
about that because this week, Martin, as I was, for some reason, and a lot of times they hit me while I'm watching this show, Will Trent, for whatever reason. I love that show. And I know
mm,
I put out a podcast on my Diabetic Real podcast that looked like I was being down on Will Trent. And I wasn't trying to, pick on him, but it was, I won't go all into that. If you guys want to see the episode, it's the Diabetic Real
yep,
podcast. But anyway, there's a lot of times for some reason I'm watching television and I'll see something and it's like, oh man, I have to make a podcast about that. And I like to reference the
yeah,
television show. So I'll go look at on IMDb or something, IMDb.com. I'll look up I'll try to link to that so people can see what it was I was watching. But for whatever reason, I'll see something because Michael and I watch television as we're falling asleep. So I get
yeah,
these like old shows or whatever that we're watching on Paramount or Hulu or whatever. And I don't know, that will inspire me. But a lot of times they reference their episodes that I do for Diabetic Real. For whatever reason, that's where I get a lot of inspiration for that podcast. So I don't know if that fits for Studio Fusion,
yes. I
but
feel,
that helps me. Martin, what about you? Is there something
yeah,
that inspires you?
that's one of my tips for as a new media advisor. I say become a sponge. So
Hmm.
everything comes in your way, even bad, good things, whatever news. We have that with my co-host Blair, the secular foxhole. We have a segment called News Sandwich segment, and we give a hat tip to the person who came about the individual Amy Peikoff. She said it's like a sandwich. So first is some good things, the bread, and then the not so good thing in the middle, and then you end with some good stuff. So we have
Hmm.
that as a thing, and then you search for good things, and you find like resources. We have one site called the how to say the progressive or development things, like positive things that's happening in technology, life science, whatnot. So we find that, but also then it's very easy to find not so good things. When you could turn on the telly and you'll find
Hmm.
something, or open the newspaper, right?
Hmm.
But then you could do it with your spin, or in a positive way,
Right, right.
and see opportunities. So I think that's a good thing. I take that as a sponge, as I said, and use and come up with ideas. So I think that's a good thing. And nowadays, if you really are, having drying out of ideas, I recommend that also if I have a potential client or a client starting podcast, write down something that you're passionate about, you have an interest, you have knowledge about, at least like 10, 20, whatever, a full page of topics. If you have that, then you have for several episodes. Of course, that could be
I got
changed. Yeah, that's good. A notebook,
this little
that's
thing, and they're
perfect.
they're very small, so it
Yeah,
fits in my purse. And then when I'm riding, because a lot of times Michael's driving, so when we're driving our little Jag that we use for
yeah,
podcast
yes.
Jag, and no, I'm not doing that to try to advertise my podcast, but
Well,
I'm
that's
the
good.
passenger, so I just pull this out of my purse. And I know people use digital, but sometimes I just want to write,
Yeah,
rather than doing it in the iPad. Because I also carry my iPad, but
yeah,
it's fun to write. So it's
yeah,
like you
and
see
that's
something, and it's like, oh, I got to do this because I want to do a podcast about this.
That's
So
music
do
for
you
my
have that?
ears also, because, by the way, I have a podcast with two other co-hosts called Johan Gustafsson and Johan Gudmundsson, called Pen Meets Paper in Swedish, Penna möter
Hmm.
papper, and we have done some international editions also. So we have a reason for using analog tools. So I
Yep,
think that's a good
yep.
thing.
That's a good
But
way to do
but
it.
yeah, talking about that, I listened to the latest episode of New Media Show. Rob and Todd, they talked about how you could use AI for summary of your
Hmm.
podcast episodes, and also, coming up with show prep and whatnot. So
And
that's,
Captivate
yeah.
Spark is really good for that.
Yeah, I
I think
haven't started
sometimes
using it yet, but I will soon. Yeah.
they use, what is it, eludis. What word is it that they keep using? I leave it in the show
Yeah.
notes, but it's like I would never use that word, but it's an interesting word, so I do have it in the show notes. So if you guys are
Okay.
reading the show notes from some of my other podcasts, it's like that's not a word that Deborah uses, but that I will thank Captivate Spark because The AI
Yeah.
came up with that word, and it's like,
Okay,
that's
good
an
to know.
interesting word. We'll leave that one in the show notes. So you might see that in Studio Fusion show notes because that's Captivate Spark writing it for us. So thank you.
And last time or latest time, how you say that in English grammar, it's we talked about 2 episodes, right, about the communities and digital town halls.
Yep.
And there,
Yep.
I hope that in the long run, but it will take some time, but we will get input, ideas, suggestions for topics from
Yep.
the community, from the fans, the true fans, the
Yep.
loyal listeners, for other maybe co-host or round table or like Michael, guests in the
Yep.
future also, new guests and returning guests,
Yes.
other fellow podcasters. Yeah, so
Exactly. And with the Studio Fusion,
without, now I interrupt you, but without, because that could be a thing. Now, Pod News Daily said, now podcasting really is mainstream because 50% of all Americans, they listen now to podcast.
wow.
When I started in 2006, it was 11% that listen to podcast. 11%.
Now it's 50%. 50% of Americans listen to podcasts. Wow.
Yeah.
What about in Europe?
That's in Sweden. It's 50% have been for some time now, and they
Okay.
have this survey study called Internet and the Swedes. But then, of course, it's how you ask a question. Do you watch a podcast? Then it may be bump up because some are watching podcasts, so to speak.
Right.
So, but I thought that was a positive thing. And now back to your thread because I interrupt you, Deborah. So you were saying?
I don't. Oh, other than the Studio Fusion Club.
Yeah.
StudioFusion.club. I was saying there's not a lot of activity in there right now because it's just 2 of us. But
Yeah.
as we get more people interacting,
And
then
Gail
that's
and
definitely
Deborah,
a place where,
and Eileen.
and
Yeah.
then we can get some topic ideas going on that one. And
Yeah,
with
it's a
any
long
community,
range
the more
thing.
that people that you get involved, the more that it starts to grow, and it's exponential from that. So
Yeah. And there I had not a negative thing, but I could see, and that could be like in Sweden. I don't know how that's in America also, but after a time it could be like a bubble also. The same guest at the same at different podcasts and the same topics, and it's going round and round. And I
Right.
hope there are so many podcasts out there, so they are so-called diversity, or you could pick and choose and so on. But it's very easy that it could be the same. But
Yep.
then it's up to you as a podcaster. Okay, I remember Chris Brogan, he said, do your research and ask me maybe, give me like a soft curveball or whatever he said. Like, for example, Batman or Spider-Man, because he's a Batman fan. Then you have done a little bit of, if you start with that,
right.
or at ending or something like that, then the guest will feel, you have done some research or something that I like to. So that's something to think about also. For
Sorry,
topics.
I was watching. I thought Trudy was doing something.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and,
she wanted
I'm
to
reading your mind.
participate.
If-
Participate.
If you don't know what to do, have a topic about pets.
I was
and
just,
I am a
I was
cat
just thinking
person.
that. I was just
I'm
thinking
a cat
that.
person. So.
It's like
and
sometimes
you're a dog person.
your little friend can help, give you ideas. So
Yeah.
And sometimes, I added you notice in my lower third, I added the Deborah's.live, which actually, and it is advertising, I admit it, but if you go there, it goes to my TikTok profile. Just to live
And
TikTok.
for me lately, we have, for example, some in the pipeline potential guests, and people are interested. When we will match, the booking and so on, the time difference and whatnot. You could see if you follow fellow podcasters and others on Podcasting Index, Podcasting 2.0, or podcastindex.org, or what it's called, .social. We will get that in the link, right?
Right.
So,
right.
So there, because that statistics that James said, I think it's only like 1% of Americans that use Mastodon or Fediverse.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, is it higher in Europe?
So that hasn't catch on.
Is it higher in Europe?
I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Because it's that to come into it and how to pick a place to go and the server and to sign up, and then don't get that it's so different from other things. But
I know among the chatting, in the communities I'm in, people are just like, oh no, I'm not getting into that.
Yeah, but I really like it, and now with again true fans. With features, we will see, because that's how you could also come up with new episodes and new topic and continue the old ones.
Yep. I find
that
a
you
lot.
See the comment threads.
Yeah, exactly. By hanging out in True Fan. My problem is I don't get off of True Fan, so I can hang out there for a couple of days and then I don't get anything done.
Yeah. And that's that I really see, and that's the gamification and also how it's served. I see, the more I listen, the more I want to listen to new podcasts and whatnot.
And then I want to go top up so I have more sats to give.
Yes, I said that to Sam at a conversation with him. It's very easy to top up, and he said, "Okay, I'm sorry, Martin."
Yep.
But he's not. But that's the good thing.
But
it has to be easy to do it. Otherwise, it will never, catch on that we want to in the long run. But it will take some time.
TikTok, like I was saying with my link here, TikTok's the same way, and I do get topics from that as well, hanging out there.
That's good.
But TikTok, I want to add coins, because when I go to other people's lives, I want to say, hey, you're doing a good job, and then you give gifts. And it's the same thing, it's similar to the sats with podcasts. So then I want to give, and so I top up so I can give more.
The good thing with super comments, and that is with a monetary transaction, a small one, but it is a bit of a Bitcoin. It is a Satoshi, so it's real money. So in the future, I will spend more than I get and receive.
Oh, I do too. I love giving.
In the long run, and it's not for earning money, but I know it could be a safe place for the future.
Right.
And if we could then top up in an easy way, then it will be more coins in the system in a positive way. That's really valuable, and it will go around. But it also, in the long run, maybe you want to take out some, or maybe set up a hub, or a node, or it's all things that. So it's very interesting ecosystem and financial alternative.
It is. And TikTok has a separate. It's not the sats, but it's a similar type ecosystem as far as the. And I give more right now. I haven't really set up because I'm not asking people to give to me. But I love to give to others. I just love going into lives and saying, "Hey, you're doing a good job. Let me give gifts and give all that." And it's fun to do. So, and that's the same kind of thing that happens at True Fans, where it's like you love to give.
And they're talking about that. If you get like a boostergram or super comment, as they say on True Fans, then you could get also ideas of future topics or follow up of an episode because you get constructive feedback. You get input.
Exactly. And if you do with us, you get a shout out on Studio Fusion. So just so you know,
good.
Not to ask for that, but if you do,
but we have to ask. That's our challenge. If you don't ask, people don't know.
Yep, exactly.
But of course you shouldn't get boring or only talking about that.
Right. And what's our? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead.
That's it.
What's our call to action for this week? I was gonna suggest that people take the time, whether they're using like a little notebook like this or whether they're doing it digitally, to sit down and either list some topics for their podcast, and maybe they don't have a podcast, but for whatever project you're doing, if it's not a podcast, although these are tips for podcasts, so I assume that you have a podcast, but list your topics or list ideas of how you're going to get topics, either or on that.
Well, that's good. And I will do it for our own sake then. Give us some topics, suggestions for our podcast. Studio Fusion. So read our what you have written so well. It's sticking out a bit, our description of a podcast, and then you could figure out and think and tinker. What kind of topics do you want to have and listen to or debate or discuss or whatever in the future?
Yep, and you can do that at studiofusion.club. It's free to join, so
good.
You can definitely suggest topics at our community, studiofusion.club. And you mentioned AI. I just wanted to say, and I am putting out an advertisement for Magi. I'll put a link in our show notes. wonderful AI where you can get. I go there sometimes, not always for podcast topics, but I should. But I do that for other projects. I'll go and put in a prompt and have it suggest topics, and then I put that. I have a database. Well, I won't go all into it, but I have a system that I use for my podcast and for my other projects. Then I list all my topics for the future. That's a great method, and thanks to Martin for mentioning AI, like for show notes and things. But that's a great way to have your list of topics. So I want to make sure that we add that one in there as an idea for a topic.
And I think that's a good service. And I recently started using a service called Ruby AI.
Ruby AI.
Yeah,
and there's several. There's a lot of AI. I mean, you could use.
And it's included with ChatGPT and whatnot.
Yeah.
But it's on the same. You get it in one place. So that's good. So we could include that in show notes. And
you could get your challenge done just like that.
Yeah.
You use one of those services. Yeah, exactly. Your call to action done. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Deborah.
And thank you all for joining us on Studio Fusion. And that's another episode. And we hope to see you same time, same place next week.
Yep.